So the song, Some Gave All, and the Flashing Faces. The Flashing Faces was about 3,800 service people who have lost their lives in Afghanistan. There have been about 5,600 people who have lost their lives. So they acknowledge that they missed out on about close to 2,000 people. The reason that I wanted to start the talk there is that this month has been about responding to that call, responding to that still small voice. And Memorial Day is an opportunity. Many times people think of it as that national holiday for those picnics, for those sales. Oh my gosh, there are things that you can buy at Home Depot that you can never get at any other time. There gets so much that gets promoted. The notion of Memorial Day, for anybody who's been here before and has heard me, I've done a little bit of the history lesson of it. It came about because women from the South and women from the North, after the end of the Civil War, wanted to memorialize all of their husbands and their fathers and their sons who had passed away, who had died in that conflict. And so it was these women from opposing sides who worked together to bring about this holiday. It didn't become a national holiday until the 1970s. So the impetus of it was acts of love and remembering from people who had very powerful losses in their own lives. So to take today and to figure out, well then what do I do with this spiritually? What is the practical tool that it inspires in us, that it can guide us? How does it move us? How does it expand us? How does it become a point of spiritual practice? The month is about responsibility and the responsibility to listen. So I would claim that those people, that Nancy has been taking on an added responsibility for the well-being of others. I know that Steve has served. I know that Mykal has served. This notion of service in the name of this country is a noble and honorable service. I know that there have been protests. I know that many of the people that came back from Vietnam were not greeted with open arms. I know that when we did not win in Korea, the homecomings were different. After the First World War and after the Second World War, there was an embrace and there were parades. Parades really haven't gone on with the Korean War. They hadn't gone on with the Vietnamese War. They haven't really gone on with people coming back from the Middle East. And there's all kinds of political feelings that get mixed up in it. Is it right? Is it wrong? Should we do this? Should we not do this? And we can get distracted by the arguments. And in that distraction, we can forget to acknowledge the people who have given so much. So I would say one of the responsibilities is the ability to remember, the ability to recall, the ability to remember, also the ability to give thanks. We can think of those in a couple of different ways. So I'd like to talk a little bit about our abilities that enable us to be responsible. The whole idea of responsibility is the ability to respond. So I'd like to put this in the context of the Science of Mind teachings. Earnest Holmes drew a picture of a circle to symbolize all that is. And today's talk, the theme is that if God is all there is, that God is in Mykal, in Steve, in Mary. God is in Tayan. God is in David. God is in Nancy. God is in Cheryl. God is in me. God is in each being that we encounter. God is in this planet, in this solar system, in this cosmos. That's what Earnest Holmes taught. And we're free to believe that or not. I find for myself that it coincides with what I believe. So it makes sense to me. It makes a lot more sense than the more simple picture of a deity that's very white, like I am, with a long white beard and long white hair. Creating things. Sometimes the limits of our imagination set a limit on what the divine can be, on what the spirit can be. And sometimes the limits of our imagination limit our abilities. They limit our responsibilities. They limit our capacity to respond. So as we expand on our abilities, we get to expand on that image of God. Let me tell you a story. In 1866, a person signed up to be a soldier. Came from Missouri. Isn't Missouri the show me state?
Yeah.
So the show me state, this soldier signs up. Signs up as William Cathy. William Cathy joins the Buffalo team, which is the Buffalo Soldiers. These are African American soldiers, black soldiers, Negro soldiers. The name has changed over the years, but it was a group of people that had been enlisted in the Civil War in the North and had fought for the freedom of the slaves in the South. And actually, if you go back in history, you'll find that African American people who had been slaves and people who hadn't been slaves had been participating in military actions from the very inception of this country. So William Cathy's signing up was part of a long-standing tradition. William Cathy and that company that William joined marched 700 miles over the next year. They arrived in New Mexico, and they were at a base in Apache territory. And one of William's colleagues wrote about the hazards and the dangers of being in that place. You could very easily get knifed, get arrowed, and it happened fairly regularly. William Cathy survived. William Cathy also had various bouts of ending up in the hospital. And in spite of that, in spite of having illness, in spite of sickness, kept coming back. Sometimes it was 2 days, sometimes it was 3 days. One time it was a month. But William Cathy just kept coming back to serve. We all have an ability to persevere. We have the ability, it's a matter of choice. Am I going to choose to do it or not? And am I going to choose to continue or not? And am I going to choose to give or not? William Cathy kept choosing to give. So it was 1866 when William signed up. Finally, after a series of bouts of illness, William was discharged with 2 other people. William was really Cathy William, not William Cathy. She signed up. She did all of the work of all of the men in her battalion. She was able to hide her identity as a woman for all of that time. She did everything as well as anything as any of the other people in her group. She's one of the first people that we know of to join the army. Now we know that there were other women, there were other African American women who served during the Civil War, during the Revolutionary War. I mentioned the story of Kathy William, because sometimes we can't always show who and what we are. But we can always be who and what we are. Kathy William chose to be of service. After she was discharged and she received payments from the U.S. military for her year and a half of service, after Kathy William was discharged, she continued to go on. She continued to move with other armies, and she served as a laundress. She served as a cook. She served in all of the ways that typically women of that day and age were able to serve. But she had that year and a half of service beside the other servicemen that was just like what everyone else expected. Now for me, Kathy William speaks a powerful message. She's going to offer, for me, a touchstone to think about that teaching symbol that I started to talk about, and what is in it for us, what we're able to do. Now, Earnest Holmes thought that we could take that whole cosmic conception and we could think of it as three particular characteristics. We could think of it as spirit or mind, we could think of it as soul or law, and we could think of it as body. Let me talk about the different abilities in each one of those areas. The abilities of the mind, the abilities of the soul, and the abilities of the body. And how they can be different places of responsibility that we can either say yes to or no to. Responsibilities of the mind, abilities that we have. The capacity to plan. Now I know you could all do it because look, you're all here. It took something to get here. It would be very easy on a gray Sunday morning to just sleep in. You had to plan to get up. I see you're all wearing clothes. You had to plan to be dressed. I don't see anybody wearing, I don't smell anything really terrible. I don't see anything that's really grimy or so you had to plan to have clean clothes and outfits that are put together. Planning is one of those abilities of the mind. Organizing likewise. I see people brought coats, people brought things. We're organized. Nancy talked about being able to go to the Seattle Center this afternoon. She's got a plan, she's organized, she's able to get it together. She's hoping that her shoes will work. We'll do it for her. There are those planning, those organization, those strategies. In the process of prayer, we have to figure out what we want in order to make a plan. So we have to be able to look at a situation, study it, and figure out what it is we're looking for. Learning is said to consist of two things. There are two orders of learning. There's the order of learning things on the move. That's called fluid, being able to move with things, go with things as they come up. The ability to respond. There's also being able to pull from things we've learned a long time ago and bring them forward. Bring them into the now. You all seem to be nodding. You all seem to be looking at me. So you are all right now using a store of knowledge to understand what the heck I'm saying. That relies on that kind of capacity. The ability to draw on words. The fancy term in psychology is crystallized intelligence. We're all in a place of using crystallized intelligence. But that ability to turn things around quickly, the ability to respond to things, you have to do it all the time when you're driving, right? If you aren't doing it, then you're very likely going to end up in an accident. We were coming up and somebody's walking across the street. We're coming around the corner. fluid intelligence to say, I must stop. If I don't stop, that person holding his bicycle is going to be on my hood. And I don't know that I want that hood ornament. I don't know that I want all the interesting things that will be associated with having that person as my hood ornament this morning. So there is that knowledge as another area. And it's that fluid knowledge, it's that crystal intelligence. Those are some of those abilities of mind. In order to pray, we have to be able to use that kind of thinking. What is it we want? The ability to identify what it is. I heard the request to keep that company and the highest and the best. So we have to be able to imagine them. We have to be able to imagine their well-being. We have to imagine what well-being even is. Anytime we're going somewhere, we have to imagine the destination. If you didn't imagine folk life, why would you bother to get ready to go there? So, that prayer, we're praying for something. It's not just a nebulous, I'm going to pray. Now, there are faiths that just pray. But the particular prayer that Earnest Holmes inspired was a very focused prayer. It was about fulfillment of specific things. And the things can be as simple as, I really want to find my shoe. There's no reason that spiritual mind treatment cannot be used to find that shoe. Because there is an order in this universe, and this order is in all, as all, through all. This order is expressing, therefore, in me now. So I know that this ordered universe includes my shoe. And my shoe is right where I need it. My shoe is right here, right now. And while I may not see it, I know that I will touch it. I know that I will put it on. I give thanks for this shoe. I give thanks for this order. I give thanks for this presence. And in this place of gratitude, I release this to the automatic action of the law, that aspect, that soul, which is always operating, like gravity. If I dropped my shoe, it had to fall. So if I speak this word and I declare it, it goes into and falls into the law. And it is made so. And so it is. Just an example of a prayer about a shoe. Prayer can be as simple as that. And it can be as complex as the well-being of a company. It can be as complex as, in the midst of all of this political turmoil, who will be the next president of the United States? How will things turn out with the Supreme Court? How will all of these monies that are being spent on this political process, how can it go towards something good? How can it go towards the highest and best? How do I imagine that as the outcome and hold it? That's an ability of mind. What about the abilities of the soul? Now I'm going to look a little bit to Tan for this, because Tan works with people to call forth their highest and best. They come to her. Most likely they come to Tan because things are not going as they hope. Or they know that it could go better. The notion of the soul is often our emotional energy. I heard Cheryl say earlier that our emotions can be one of the most powerful features of our lives. The notion of the law, that's the power of the divine. You put it into the power of the law, and it is made so. So what is the power of the law that we have? We have our emotional lives. Again, another thing that became equated with spiritual mind treatment and the science of mind teachings was the idea of thought and
action.
Feeling. A thought and a feeling lead to an outcome. So that notion of emotional abilities, I'm going to speak a little bit about those. One of them is simply the ability to recognize that you've got an emotion going on.
Yeah, that's a big one.
I can think of many times that we have emotions going on and we are clueless. And in that cluelessness, we have lost power. I remember a certain argument with my mother, and she and I were talking, and I said, "You seem really upset." "I'm not upset." "What do you mean I'm upset?" "Well, you're speaking quickly." "I'm not speaking quickly." "Well, you're speaking more quickly than I am." "Well, and what I am?" "You are upset. You're the one that's upset." And part of the difficulty is that feelings have a magic ability. Feelings can be projected. We can take the mirror of our soul out and project it onto someone. One of the abilities is to recognize, am I doing that? Is this my feeling? Is this your feeling? So not only an ability of the soul is the ability to recognize our own feelings, it's the ability to recognize the feelings of others. There's been the description of something called emotional intelligence. When it first came out in the 90s, it was a pretty radical idea. Many, many corporations have taken it on. Many schools have taken it on because they've discovered that, in fact, emotional intelligence is far more important than intellectual intelligence. We can know lots of people who seem very, very bright, but they can't seem to go anywhere. They can't seem to do anything. It's the emotional of the intelligence, the ability to recognize what's going on, and the ability to recognize it in others. That's why scams work so well. A scam artist is able to read the emotions and run with them. That's one of the big abilities. It's the ability to not only read the emotion and use the emotion and harness the emotion. Recognize it, you harness it, and use it. How do we better recognize our emotions? Well, that brings us back to that spiritual practice we tried on earlier today, which was meditation. Meditation is a time when we can just get still. Because as we're running pell-mell through our lives, it can be very easy that emotions just come up, and if we don't take a moment, those emotions take us. One of the images that a great teacher with religious science has used is it's a carriage. And it's a carriage drawn by a horse. The horse being those emotions. Now we can let the horse take us away. We can get completely abducted by the horse. This was Marcia Sutton. Marcia Sutter's Sutton. Sorry, Marcia. One of the things is to have a coach driver so that the horse doesn't just go wild. How do we remember to get back in the driver's seat? That can be an ability of the mind that we bring in to the emotional life, our soul. Meditation may be an opportunity to just slow down. We practice it here every Sunday. We practice it at home. And again, meditation doesn't mean you have gone to a mountaintop and you had a retreat for 3 weeks there, and that's how meditation has to happen. In the context of this 3 weeks away from the rest of the world. That may be a great way to get familiarized with and accustomed to and practicing meditation. But the point of it is to be able to figure out, how do I pull it out of my hat at a moment's notice? How do I choose to enter into stillness at the drop of a dime? That's an act of emotional intelligence. That's an ability that we all have. The last set of abilities I want to talk about are in that final place, in that circle that Earnest Holmes drew. If we've got mind, spirit, if we've got soul, law, the bottom is where it all manifests, where it all shows up. It's the body. Now, body can be really difficult for people that are really in their heads. I tell you this because I speak from years and years and years of experience. I lived in my head probably 98% of my life. I separated from my body for some very practical reasons. I was diagnosed with diabetes at the age of 7, and one of the features of diabetes, the treatment for type 1, is daily injections. Now, I was a kid who loved shots. Now, I don't know that many children who really love them. Please pick me, I want to have the shot, I want it, please pick me. There aren't that many. However, I'm just saying, when you're diagnosed with diabetes at the age of 7, it's just what's going to happen. And it's not, there's no prospect that there's a new solution. Are you sure the pill won't work? We're sure. So, my way of coping with it was to just not really pay much attention to my body. To separate it from it. It's my body is carrying my soul, my body is carrying my mind, and it's only important for those two functions. So I will do what I can to keep it alive, but that doesn't mean I have to like it, that doesn't mean I have to really think that much about it. So, priesthood seemed like a great path. You know, it was about being able to be free of my body. It's about being able to make sacrifices. Celibacy, who cared? You know, I don't need this body, I'm not going to have this body. What's that? Poverty, why do I need things? All kinds of choices and all kinds of ideas can come out of our connections with our body. And again, I'm speaking from my own story, and I know that you are all far more advanced than me and must have much brighter ways and have learned better ways to get along with your body. For me, it really wasn't until my body was very, very, very sick that I realized, hey, wait a second, I think I have to actually do a little bit more than just know that it's going to carry me through. Sometimes it's those crises that our body brings us that open a most profound spiritual experience. I'll tell you, I was at end-stage renal failure. I had a level 10, you know, the pain spectrum, a level 10 headache constantly. Blood sugar that was up and down and up and down. So I wasn't even really all that able to use the mind that I thought was pretty good. My feelings were all wrapped up in just intense fury. That the divine would create this great mind and this great body, this great soul, but then have this crappy body as part of the bargain. I was very bitter, God. I remembered the blasphemy that Jesus Christ had it easy. He was on the cross for what, 3 hours? Then he was in the tomb for 3 days, then he's done with it all. Then he gets arrested, he has this eternal body. I have been months and months and months of this headache and this kidney failure, and I'm over it. I need a miracle. And I know I'm not going to get it. I wrote this suicide letter to my dad because I had very much intended that I was going to end it all. I just did not want to put up with it anymore. I had seen the movie, some of you may be familiar with It's a Wonderful Life. And I felt very much like the character that Jimmy Stewart played, George Bailey. George Bailey knew that if he died, then his family could collect in the insurance and things would turn out okay. Because old man Potter said, you know, you're more dead than alive. So I was completely ready. And one of the features in the movie, if you remember, please God, take care of George. Watch over my friend George. Daddy, watch over my daddy. There's all these people all over the world that are praying for George Bailey. So God sends George an angel. And the angel shows George what the world would have been like without him. And he realizes, hey, I might be miserable right now, but the world is more miserable without me than it is with me. So I felt like I had this story, and I had my own life, and nothing like that could ever happen. And yet, when I got the call, on the day before I was planning to go with my kids, I was planning to take them to Philadelphia. My plan was to end it all there. That was when I got the call from the doctor saying, we have a perfect match, kidney and pancreas for you. For me, I had this miracle. But it wasn't just that. It wasn't just the match. It was that I literally had people all over the world. My sister had been with a family in Australia. And so she had, one of those family members was in the Antarctic. Other of those family members were in Australia. So Mykal was praying for me in the Antarctic. Other people were praying for me in Australia. Another one of them was in Asia. I had another cousin that was in Africa. I had a therapist that was in Africa. I had family that was in South America. I had family that was in the North America. I had family in Europe. So I had all the bases for all over the world covered. I think I got my sign pretty clearly. What this taught me is that the body is as important as the spirit and the mind. So the ability is to be able to say, how do I use this body well? How do I let this chariot? And I feel like I have to do a little bit more because I'm living the life of the first person I got the transplanted kidney and pancreas from. And now I'm also living with the kidney that my sister donated. So I am living for more people's bodies. I've got my own body, I've got the body that was transplanted to me from the person in 1996, and I've got the body of my sister's kidney that was donated to me in 2010. I've had this message made very clear to me, that the body is important, and how is it that I am called to use my body? Well, I know many of you have seen me running around and stuff. Part of it is that the body is also a vehicle for health and well-being. We can have the best ideas, but if we don't have a way to deliver them, it's not going to make that much of a difference. So, that final place is, how do we use what our body is and call on its abilities and bring it forward? Sometimes we may ask, well, why am I here? Maybe we're here taking up this space because as we're here taking up this space, we may pass someone and they may look really awful, but we can hold something better for them. We can smile back. And they may not catch the contagion of the smile, but they may see it. They may see that we see them. They may sense that they are seen and noticed. Because our bodies are part of the package. Again, Earnest Holmes drew this whole circle. And then there was spirit, mind, soul, law, body. Ultimately, those are ways we have to respond. Those are abilities that we have to embrace. My invitation is embrace our minds and our spirits. Embrace our souls. Embrace our bodies. And be ready to give the gifts that they have to give. And so it is. I'd like to end with this other